Well, the often fierce climate change debate was reignited recently when the United Nations admitted its claim that the Himalayan glaciers would melt by 2035 was wrong. And that's music to the ears of one of the world's most outspoken skeptics on the issue, Lord Christopher Monckton. I spoke to him earlier and began by asking him why he thinks climate change is a sham.
I believe in climate change, of course I do, because there's been climate change for the last 4.5 billion years. However, the question is how much warming can a little bit of extra CO2 in the atmosphere cause? And the answer is that the United Nations Climate Panel and its many admirers around the world who are hoping to make money, as it does, out of this scam, has multiplied by at least 6 or 7 times the warming effect to be expected from CO2 or any other greenhouse gases that we might add to the atmosphere. If you take away that exaggeration, you take away the problem.
So what you're saying essentially is that the scientists have got their sums wrong, is that right?
The scientists have indeed got their sums wrong, because there are only perhaps 40 or 50 scientists involved in calculating that one central quality, which is known as climate sensitivity. How much warming will you get? It's a very narrow, very specialist field in which I have actually published work in the reviewed literature, and there's not many people who have done that. Very few people have actually done any work in this field, and unfortunately what they have done is they have preferred, at the UN's climate panel, to rely on computer models, which are in effect a form of guesswork, when, thanks to satellites, we now have means of measuring and doing very simple calculations to work out what this vital climate sensitivity parameter really is, how much warming you really will get as we add CO2 to the atmosphere. Yes, you will get some warming, but it will in fact only be about half a Celsius degree of warming per doubling of CO2 concentration. That's half a Celsius degree in the whole of the coming century. That is all.
Why do you think that the idea that global warming is happening is being foisted, if you will, that seems to be your contention, is being foisted on the world? I think you believe it's a pretext, right?
Well, of course it is an excuse for the governing class to make money out of us. Politicians want to put through an emissions trading scheme here in Australia, from which I'm speaking, that would be the largest tax increase in Australian history. The politicians on the left only, but no longer on the right, in the United States, want to put through a similar scheme, which would be the largest tax increase in the history of the world. But even if schemes like this all over the world were put in place, no difference to the climate would happen at all that you could measure. It would cost trillions, and the only people who would benefit would be bankers. And is that what anybody really wants? I don't, for one.
Now, you've called global warming activists Hitler Youth. You've called for the UN to be shut down and for Al Gore to be arrested. Isn't that all a little extreme, Lord Monckton?
I think it's proportionate to the damage that these institutions of government or persons in government are doing to ordinary working people. Working people depend on their politicians not to go wild and follow these mad ideas which lead to overtaxation and overregulation on specious grounds. I don't think it's right that working people should be flung out of jobs. They should have to pay 4 times as much for their electric power. They should see their jobs transferred from their own countries to countries somewhere else, in the name of saving the planet from what is now known to be a non-problem. And those who are profiteering, as Al Gore has done to the tune of many hundreds of millions of dollars, at the expense of the ordinary little guy, ought to be held to account for having, in many cases, deliberately misrepresented the science.
Do you think that some of that, the extremity of that rhetoric, though, actually puts people off your cause rather than brings them to it?
I see. So what you're saying is it's all right for Al Gore to say that sea level is going to rise 20 feet when it's actually going to rise by less than 1 foot. It's all right for James Hansen to say that people like me who disagree with him ought to be put on trial for high crimes against humanity, for which the penalty is death. And you don't allow me to answer these people by saying, just one moment, maybe it is you who should be arrested.
Now,
have you ever, just be honest here with me, have you ever interviewed Dr. Hansen or anyone at NASA to find out whether they regard his suggestion that people like me should be put on trial for high crimes against humanity to be acceptable?
What do you want people to do about global warming? What's your advice to Joe Average?
The correct policy to deal with a non-problem is to have the courage to do nothing. I realise that that's not what politicians like to do, but this really is a non-problem. We've seen the science of the UN's climate panel collapsing just over the last few days. They've now admitted that the Himalayan glaciers are not going to disappear by 2035, as they had said in their last report that they would.
Okay, and just to put that in some perspective, Lord Monckton is not a scientist. He once edited a Catholic newspaper, and he has no scientific qualifications. He's an hereditary peer, though, which may make some difference. The guy, James Hansen, pardon me, whom he was referring to, was from NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies, and James Hansen is a scientist and is one of the most outspoken advocates of doing something about global warming.
Have you interviewed him?
Lord Monckton is correct. I have not interviewed him. It just seemed to me that the purple nature of Lord Monckton's rhetoric, where, you know, calling it climate activists Hitler Youth, saying that Al Gore should be arrested, the UN should be shut down. Well, maybe I agree with him about that part. But yeah, it doesn't make for reasoned, sensible discussion of what is an issue that we do have to confront in some way.
I think in the UK that the judicial system ruled that climate change is a religion. There was an incident, I think, before the Employment Court, and someone was persecuted because of their climate change beliefs. I think that that judge in that case...
Were they for global warming? Or
they were... Oh, I don't even know. But anyway, well, they must have been pro-climate change.
No,
it was therefore considered a religion. And I think, like any religion, you get your religious extremists, don't you? And your extreme disbelievers.
It does have religious-like aspects. I mean, both sides are like cargo cults, with and Lord Monckton is essentially, he's the high priest of the global warming skeptics. I don't know where those eyes come from. That's all I'm going to say.